In an instant, my world turned upside down when my husband's voice, sharp and unforgiving, cut through the phone. "Why do you always collapse when I need you?" he complained, as if oblivious to the urgency that had me rushed to the hospital, our unborn child's safety hanging by a thread. "We're here, hungry, waiting for your terrible cooking, and you're off relaxing in the hospital," he continued, his words devoid of concern. He declared he'd had enough and was going to dine out with his parents, leaving me to find my own way home. His anger reached me even through the phone, blaming me as if I were at fault for a dire situation, instilling fear and worry in me, especially for our unborn child whom I was desperate to protect. Once, I was a passionate cosmetic salesperson, recognized for my dedication and hard work, with a collection of awards and a reputation for excellence. I loved my job and the confidence it brought me. Meeting my husband seemed like a fairy tale, leading to a whirlwind romance and marriage. But the joy of discovering my pregnancy came with a tough decision to leave my job due to the risk of miscarriage, a choice made with our family's future in mind. As I navigated the challenges of pregnancy, my husband's support waned, transforming from excitement to frustration. Simple tasks became monumental, and my attempts to meet his expectations often fell short. "Where's my lunch?" he'd ask, only to scoff at the simple sandwiches I managed to prepare, citing my inability to handle smells. His words stung. Pregnancy is not an illness, dismissing my struggles and leaving me to fend for myself. This shift in his behavior was a stark contrast to the man I fell in love with. His companionship at doctor's visits faded, as did his empathy for the household chores that now seemed insurmountable to me. Our home, once a place of mutual respect and love, felt increasingly like a battleground, with me trying to protect not just my well-being, but that of our unborn child, clinging to the hope that somehow we'd find our way back to understanding and support. Perhaps he's just exhausted, I reasoned. He's taken on a mentorship role for a newcomer at work, and it's been demanding. This might explain why he's been less patient and more irritable with me lately. I keep telling myself that once our baby arrives, his hectic schedule will calm down, and we'll find our rhythm as a family. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, caressing my growing belly, trying to stay positive despite the struggles with my changing body and our strained relationship. Yet things haven't gotten better between my husband and me. To add to the tension, my in-laws have started to drop by without notice, increasing my stress levels. They question the cleanliness of our home and express concern over how we'll manage once the baby is here. Despite their criticisms, they expect hospitality and demand I prepare something for them to eat on the spot. Each visit from my in-laws ends with them leaving in disappointment, my husband siding with them, never defending me. Doing my best isn't enough. I'm left feeling inadequate in their eyes. On one such visit, after being sent out to buy groceries while heavily pregnant, I collapsed from the strain. I woke up in the hospital, learning I had passed out from overexertion, but thankfully, our baby was still safe. The doctors advised a few days of rest in the hospital. Seeing missed calls from my husband on my phone, I realized he must have been worried when I didn't return from the store. Yet when I finally called him back, hoping for some concern or relief in his voice, I was met with anger instead. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his words harsh and unforgiving, as if my health and our baby's safety were of no concern to him. Hearing his harsh words, I shuddered. "I'm sorry I collapsed at the grocery store and was rushed to the hospital," I explained. "They've put me on IV fluids and advised me to stay here for a few days for observation." But his response was cold and impatient, as if my well-being mattered less than his inconvenience. "You collapsed, and I'm supposed to care? Why don't you answer when I call you?" "You're so slow," his words cut deep, and I couldn't bear the thought of our unborn child being exposed to such negativity. "Please stop yelling. It's not good for the baby." I tried to reason with him, but it was futile. He continued, undeterred by my plea for kindness. "We're here starving, waiting on your terrible cooking, and you're just taking it easy in the hospital." His intent to dine out with his parents and leave me to fend for myself, even in my condition, was clear. His voice, filled with anger and devoid of concern, made me recoil, not wanting to expose my baby to any harsher words. I ended the call, feeling utterly alone and disheartened. As I returned to my hospital room, tears began to stream down my face uncontrollably. It was in this vulnerable moment that a familiar and comforting voice reached out to me. "Are you okay?" I looked up to find Helen, a customer I had grown close to during my days as a cosmetic salesperson, offering me a towel. Recognizing her immediately, relief and warmth flooded through me. "Helen, it's really you. I'm so glad you remember me." Our reunion felt like a twist of fate, a much-needed reminder of kindness and human connection in my darkest hour. Helen had been more than just a customer. She was a woman who, after a difficult divorce, had lost her self-confidence and had stopped wearing makeup entirely. I remembered the day I approached her at the cosmetics counter, offering to help her try some makeup. The transformation in her appearance was more than just physical. It was a moment of emotional healing for her, a step towards regaining her self-esteem. Over time, Helen became more than a customer. She became a friend. But suddenly, 5 years before I left my job, Helen stopped coming, and I had always wondered what had become of her. Now here she was, a beacon of support when I needed it most. "I had returned hoping to reconnect with you, Helen," I shared. "To my surprise, when I visited your previous place of work, I learned you had left." "Which really took me aback," Helen shared, her voice filled with a mix of surprise and disappointment. "I apologize for suddenly dropping in. I was actually abroad for work, you see. I run a business overseas, and it's been quite hectic. It's been ages since I've had the chance to enjoy a mer incisive, so once things settled down a bit, I decided to come back. And would you believe it? Right after I tried to find you, I ended up here with appendicitis." She explained, her laughter lightening the mood despite the circumstance. "It's just in the early stages, so medication should do the trick. Plus, if I were still abroad, the treatment cost would have been astronomical. In a way, I'm relieved it happened here." Her optimism and familiar smile infectious. This unexpected reunion lifted my spirits, and we found ourselves joyfully reminiscing about the past. As the conversation deepened, Helen, with her ever-so-kind smile, gently probed, "You don't have to share if you're uncomfortable." "But I couldn't help but notice you were upset earlier. What happened?" Trusting Helen as I did, more than just as a former customer, but as a true friend, I opened up about the struggles with my husband and in-laws. "I'm really worried about bringing my child into such an environment, afraid they'll be treated the same way I am. And now, without my job, the idea of living independently, let alone with a child, seems daunting." To my astonishment, Helen made an incredibly generous offer. "I happen to have an apartment that you could use. I manage a few properties, part of a project I developed on land I inherited. It's a cozy 2-bedroom with a separate bathroom, soundproof walls, and it's situated in a safe neighborhood close to amenities like supermarkets and a police station. There's no need for a deposit right now, and you can start paying rent. Whenever you're settled, it's a really good deal. What do you think?" Helen's enthusiasm was palpable, and her offer so sincere it brought a laugh of disbelief from me. "Are you sure you can offer it at such favorable terms?" I asked, overwhelmed by her kindness. "Absolutely, Helen. I know you well enough to trust you'll take good care of the place. Plus, I believe it's important to support each other in times of need. "You're more than welcome to stay there," she assured me, her generosity shining through. Helen's unexpected kindness was a beacon of hope, offering not just a place to stay, but the possibility of a new beginning. Eager to lend a hand to someone she valued, Helen offered her apartment to me, an act of kindness I couldn't refuse. Gratefully, I accepted. Days later, after doctors gave me the green light, I left the hospital and without a second thought moved directly into the apartment Helen had prepared for me. She had effortlessly arranged everything over a phone call, showcasing her remarkable generosity. I didn't return to the home I shared with my husband. Instead, I embraced this new beginning in Helen's welcoming and cozy apartment. Although I couldn't shake off the guilt of not paying rent immediately, Helen brushed off my concerns with a laugh, insisting it was all fine. During my husband's working hours, I stealthily returned to our shared home to retrieve my belongings. Realizing how little there felt truly mine, the house felt as empty as my heart did within its walls. Helen's support didn't stop with the apartment. She introduced me to a lawyer who had once helped her, solidifying my decision to pursue a divorce. The lawyer's encouragement was a beacon of hope, and with each hospital visit confirming the health of my growing baby, my resolve strengthened. On one such visit, as I stepped outside, my heart sank at the sight of my husband waiting for me. Panic surged through me, and though I tried to escape, my pregnant condition slowed me down. He confronted me about the lawyer and our living situation, his grip tight on my arm. I stood firm, insisting on communication through the lawyer for any discussions regarding the divorce, compensation, and child support. His refusal to provide support and demands for me to return were met with my refusal. As he tried to forcibly take me back, a young woman intervened. Rebecca, as she was called, knew my husband and immediately took a protective stance in front of me. Their familiar exchange did little to conceal the tension. Rebecca challenged my husband, George, refusing to let him take me against my will. Her determination and the threat of involving the police were enough to alter the dynamics of the situation, providing me with a glimmer of hope and the courage to stand up for myself in this unexpected confrontation. Today, when my husband heard the mention of the police, he looked scared and quickly left. I felt a rush of relief that made my legs weak. The woman, Rebecca, quickly came to my side to support me. "Are you okay?" she asked as I apologized, explaining how relieved I felt. Rebecca didn't hesitate to call a taxi for me, insisting on making sure I got home safely. Even though I felt bad for the trouble, she assured me it was no bother. When I told Rebecca my address, she was surprised to find out I lived just below her. It was a happy coincidence that we were neighbors. Rebecca, cheerful and caring, turned out to be a new employee at my husband George's workplace. She had reported George's inappropriate behavior, leading to his removal as her mentor. George was known for his lack of empathy towards female employees, making insensitive comments about personal issues like menstruation and marriage. Rebecca shared how George's behavior wasn't just a problem at work. I knew it all too well from how he treated me during my pregnancy. 3 weeks after our meeting, Rebecca and I had grown close, sharing dinners like friends. She updated me that George had been transferred to a subsidiary company after a series of complaints and issues at work. Interestingly, Rebecca was the daughter of Helen, a successful businesswoman who managed several properties, including the apartment I was staying in. George had bragged about handling Helen's account, but his behavior led to a shift in his professional standing. Helen had pushed for George's transfer after learning about his actions both at work and towards me. Rebecca, determined and capable, had taken steps to address workplace issues without relying on her mother. But once she realized I was connected to her mother, she felt compelled to act. Helen encouraged Rebecca to present all evidence against George, leading to his transfer. Now, with his decreased income and increased workload, George's position had significantly changed. Helen, with her experience, advised me not to give in to any of George's attempts to gain sympathy, emphasizing the importance of staying firm in my decision to divorce. Her advice, coming from someone with her background and knowledge, was incredibly reassuring. After deciding to divorce George, he tried to reach out through the lawyer, sharing how tough work was and how much he missed me. He even said he was sorry and wanted me back, but I stayed firm on my decision to divorce, supported by Helen. George had no choice but to agree to the divorce and the terms for child support and damages, which he would pay. Over time, however, my next big challenge was dealing with my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, who was overly excited about the baby being a boy. I sensed trouble brewing, and soon enough, my in-laws made their move. One day, as I was heading out, my father-in-law grabbed my arm. He had followed Rebecca, thinking to confront her, and then saw me. He demanded that I hand over my baby once born, claiming the baby was the family's heir. Despite my attempts to free myself, his grip was strong. Just then, a firm voice demanded. He let me go, followed by a swift move that sent him flying with a judo technique. It turned out Rebecca had mastered judo to protect herself and her mom during tough times. She's a top-ranked judoka with national titles to her name. Rebecca confronted my father-in-law, criticizing him for overlooking George's actions and trying to meddle in my life. She defended my right to start anew, emphasizing that interfering was the last thing they should do. The sound of sirens was getting closer, and it turned out Rebecca had called for help before coming to rescue me. My mother-in-law, who had been waiting nearby in the car, watched quietly as the police arrived and took both her and my father-in-law away. My father-in-law ended up being arrested, and after some reflection, my mother-in-law decided to divorce him. She wanted to start over and live a life not dictated by others, choosing to move back to the countryside. George tried to convince his mother to let him come with her, saying he was tired of his job and the lawyers, but she firmly rejected him. Through the lawyer, my mother-in-law expressed her apologies to me and left behind some money as a gesture of goodwill. Helen explained to me that it's common for people to feel lost after leaving a marriage, and that the money was likely my mother-in-law's way of saying sorry and supporting my son's future. I was surprised by her support, considering her past behavior, but grateful for her attempt to make amends. After finalizing the divorce, I gave birth to a healthy boy. My mother-in-law settled in the countryside, choosing a life of solitude over staying with George. When my father-in-law was released, he discovered the house was gone, demolished by my mother-in-law before she left. He ended up moving in with George, which only led to more trouble and eventually George's resignation from his job due to a damaged reputation. Despite everything, child support payments continued to arrive reliably, likely managed by Helen and the lawyer. Rebecca, for her part, received recognition at work and became a project leader much admired by her colleagues. Helen's projects, including women-only properties and housing for foreigners, were thriving. As for me, once my son was old enough, I planned to return to work. Helen had offered me a position at a new high-end cosmetics store she was opening. Helen continued to support me and showed affection for my son, as if he were her own grandchild. Rebecca also made time to visit us. Both of them reminded me of the strength and kindness that had helped me through the toughest times. I was determined to be just as strong and protective of my son, inspired by the incredible women who had supported me.